Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Alright, so here's a big story that nobody's really talking about. We just saw the largest Antifa sentence in US history. The biggest Antifa prison sentence in the country was just handed down, and it seems like nobody in the legacy press is interested in treating this like the terror story that it is. We got a militant from Oakland who ran an extremist anarcho-communist blog and embraced direct action violence. Certainly part of a greater trend, wouldn't you say? Well, this guy just got more than 19 years behind bars for a string of domestic terrorist attacks. We're talking the longest sentence we've seen for an Antifa militant, and it's not even making the news. Oh, I gotta tell you, as the days go by, I feel more and more vindicated for supporting President Trump and his ambitions. We saw 4 years of complete inaction, and even longer than that, as the DOJ was totally co-opted during Trump's first term. But now things are changing, and finally, some justice is being served targeting these domestic terrorist threats. And we're gonna talk about that threat, but this video is actually brought to you guys by a sponsor, so let's first play that clip. This video is brought to you guys by Ground News. Well, what can I say about Ground News other than, frankly, it's the best news aggregator on the frickin' planet. And in my view, it's one of the most important tools that you can have right now as we navigate this mainstream media fake news minefield. And here's exactly why I believe that. The media obviously picks and chooses which stories you get to hear and which stories they'd rather you not, they'd rather shove under the rug. And while using Ground News allows you to cut through that selective coverage. They expose the bias in real time with their incredible blind spot tool. The Ground News blind spot shows you what stories are being suppressed from right and left-wing news publications. In other words, you get to see the stories that the mainstream media doesn't want you to see. It's like night vision in a blackout. And so if you're as sick as I am of being spoon-fed half-truths by these fake news outlets, well then very simply you need Ground News, you need their blind spot tool in your media consumption arsenal. And here's the pitch, friends. We've teamed up with Ground News to give you guys an exclusive offer. Simply scan the QR code on screen or click the link down below in the description. That'll send you to ground.news/hivemind, where you could get 40% off their Vantage plan, which is their top premium subscription tier. So what are you guys waiting for? We are in an information war, and you need the right weapon in your arsenal. And the Ground News blind spot tool, well, that's one hell of a weapon. A huge thank you to Ground News. Now back to the video. Alright folks, so here's the case in plain terms. We've got an individual named Casey Robert Goonan, and said individual identifies as they, them, PhD in Black Studies. Again, a lot of common denominators, I would say. Well, he just pled guilty to using homemade explosive devices, IEDs, to destroy a police vehicle on a university campus, also an attempt to firebomb a federal courthouse in a federal building in Oakland, and also carrying out multiple arson attacks at UC Berkeley. Prosecutors say that Casey Goonan was inspired by the October 7th Hamas violence, and he framed the attacks as direct action for Palestine. Oh, well, would you look at that, another common denominator, huh? But of course the left would tell you that all of this, oh, it's just peaceful resistance, right? Peaceful protests. The Trump administration is cracking down on left-wing Free Palestine protests. Give me a frickin' break. Obviously, this isn't peaceful. Obviously, it's not petty vandalism. This is more coordinated, premeditated domestic extremism against government infrastructure and law enforcement. And it's not just a freak case. It's not just a freak isolated incident. This stuff is happening constantly. We saw an entire summer of this back in 2020. And it's basically continued undeterred till present day. I mean, look at what's going on in the streets of Oregon as we speak. Obviously, it's all part of a pattern here. Federal buildings being attacked, ICE being targeted. We saw an ambush attempt on an ICE facility just a couple months ago in Texas. I think 6 or more individuals were arrested and charged, and we know the motive was to kill ICE agents in that case. Thank God that their efforts were thwarted, and it's likely that those people are gonna face some heavy prison sentences just like this clown. And of course, just in yesterday's sniper case, an illegal immigrant detainee died after a sniper attack on ICE officers at an ICE facility. And the evidence in that case, the shell casings, had anti-ICE engraved on them. Another Antifa act of terrorism. Clearly what we're seeing are escalating tactics. We're seeing either riots, intimidation, or overt violence happening on a daily basis, and it's organized, premeditated, and dangerous. But instead of clearly identifying what's going on as dangerous, what do we see from the mainstream media on the far left? Well, we see some people on the far left calling Goonan a political prisoner. People are now demanding his release. And then, of course, mainstream outlets and the Democrat Party often sanitizing left-wing ideology calling it vandalism or civil disobedience. And instead of naming this anarcho-communist extremist ideology, or preferably domestic extremism, they try to spin the narrative and soften the coverage to help normalize the chaos. Or they'll tell you that Antifa doesn't even exist. It's either a myth, as Jerry Nadler told us.
It is true. There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa? That's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
Or the constant talking point that we hear that Antifa isn't an organization, it's just an idea. The idea that there's this left-wing domestic terrorism threat or organization in the country is just ridiculous. And of course, they use this notion in an attempt to magically absolve them of any responsibility or complicity, but it's utterly disingenuous. And of course, we know that this whole notion of Antifa being a decentralized organization, it's part of their black bloc tactics. This illusion of decentralization and this covering of identity. But this notion that Antifa is decentralized is ridiculous. They pretend as if, oh, it's just organic that all of these people dressed all the same with all this riot gear just show up at a specific location on a specific date, all in pursuit of a specific goal. Oh, it's just a coincidence. It's just grassroots energy, what can I say? But clearly it's organized. Clearly there's target selection. They pass around flyers. They have strategies. They train together. They have local organizers, fundraising channels. There's somebody funding all of these groups. I mean, clearly they don't have jobs, so obviously someone is organizing, someone is funding, someone is recruiting. Treating Antifa as an abstract idea obviously makes no frickin' sense at all. And so it's time to start acting accordingly and treating this exactly as Donald Trump says, as a domestic terrorist threat to the homeland. It's time for full RICO investigations. It's time to unmask these people legally. It's time to start a new federal task force that specifically targets these black bloc groups. It's time for what Pam Bondi said, longer mandatory sentences for domestic terror attacks. These people who are engaging in literal terrorism should be facing decades in prison. In other words, it's time to enforce the law. It's time to stop treating these people as if they're somehow heroes, resistance fighters, and start treating them like the criminals and terrorists that they are. Because obviously, if we don't act fast enough, it's going to continue to snowball. It's already out of control. Imagine what happens as this ideology and this freedom fighter LARP continues to expand. And even scarier, they continue to escalate in their actions, in their tactics. We've had years of riots and targeted attacks, and now we're seeing terrorist attacks and assassinations. We can no longer allow the media to shrug this off or to release their soft headlines and soft takes, their justifications or excuses for these violent actions. Enough is enough. When you are throwing Molotov cocktails and pipe bombs at federal courthouses, when you're lighting buildings on fire, when you're assassinating people, that is terrorism. And Trump is right to label Antifa a terrorist organization. What's needed is RICO. What's needed is accountability. And I'm sure the left will label that fascism, but it's anything but. What's real fascism is having to bend the knee to people who are using violence to get their way politically. If anything, putting these people in prison is the real anti-fascist work. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.